This time on the Gamers Grind Show, we traveled to 3 fantastic card game worlds. First, we'll check in with the gnomes in the garden and find out Hal's tricks. Then we'll find out if a fool and his fortune are truly soon separated. After that, we'll find out how far forward we can move in Thunderstone Advance. Plus later we'll show you new uses for games you find at thrift stores and garage sales. There are a lot of card games with a fantasy theme. Games like Summoner War, where you summon minions to protect your wizards in a strategic battle. Munchkin's longtime classic of leveling up your character and stabbing your buddies in the back while you do it. And Scary Tales has a warped view looking at some classic fairy tale characters, going head to head in battles you never expected. And once upon a time, you take turns weaving stories as a storyteller with fantastic cards to tell fantastic tales. And in Saboteur, your dwarves is whistling while you mine, but some secretly want it all for themselves. But first we'll step out into the garden and take a peek and see what those pesky gnomes are up to. Those Pesky Gnomes is a novel approach and a few twists to the classic trick-taking style of game. It has a few similarities to other trick-taking games. To oversimplify things, each player plays a single card from their 10-card hand, and the highest card value takes the trick. And of course, as in a lot of other trick-taking games, it's lather, rinse, repeat until everyone has played all their cards. But when it comes to scoring, there's a lot more to it than that. One of the first things you notice is different from other trick-taking card games, that even though there are 4 suits, each suit doesn't have the amount of cards as you might expect. Some of the cards have point values printed on them. The cards may be positive or they may be negative numbers, but if you notice the point values are equal to the card value. For new players, trying to spot the point values may feel like a mini game of Where's Waldo. So if you have new players, you may consider House Rule, where you have to call out the point values if there is one. Then there's the leaf-shaped bid tokens. These serve a dual purpose. They'll determine who goes first, and they'll affect the point value based goals, or the no goal goal. No, that wasn't a stutter, I edit those out in post. Finally, there are 10 secret goal cards separate from the playing deck. There are 3 basic kinds of goals. There are point-based goals ranging from -10 to +10, the no goal card, and then the card-based goal. If you have the no goal card, your fate is sealed before the hand even begins. And the bid tokens will actually determine your score. If you have this goal, you might want to take the opportunity to try to disrupt the plans of other players. So when you begin the game, you're dealt 10 cards, 1 goal card, and 1 bid token. You flip the bid token over, but the goal card stays face down. The player with the second highest bid token is the player that goes first, and they'll decide, or not, to name a particular suit trump for that hand. They then play the first card, called the lead card. All players must play the same suit if they are able to. If they can't play the same suit, they can play any other card. The player to play the highest card that matches the lead card wins the trick. Unless trump cards are played, then the highest trump card wins the trick. After all cards are played that hand, it's time to flip over those secret goals. With scoring, keep in mind that players can never score over 10. The first gnome was supposed to take half of all the tricks played, but managed to get 22 out of the 25 they're trying for, so they move ahead 3 spaces. The next player had the no goal, so they move ahead a total of 4 spaces that was on their bid token. The player with the no card goal ended up winning a round and got 5 cards, so they move ahead 5 spaces. Also moving ahead 5 spaces is the player is supposed to take a combination of 10 yellow or 10 blue cards. But because they overshot their goal by 5 cards, they get to move ahead 5 spaces. The last player had the goal of trying to get -5 points. In the tricks they collected, one of the cards had a point value of +5, plus they had 2 cards worth -7 points each, and another card worth +5 points. And finally, his bid token has a +1 on it, bringing the score down to -3. Since they are 2 points away from their goal, they move 2 spaces on the scoreboard. The thing to remember in this game, you are trying to score low. But after scoring 10 points, the game changes a bit. You'll have a choice of either choosing 2 goals or 2 bid tokens, but only keeping 1 of them. And when you go past 20 points, you get both 2 goals and 2 bid tokens, but only get to keep 1 of each. So after 10 and 20 points, the game gets a little more strategic. And when the first gnome reaches or passes 30 points, the game's over. And the gnome with the lowest score is the winner. This is a good game for people that like card games, but may be looking for something that's garden fresh. The secret gold bid tokens makes every hand different. But now you're done fooling around with gnomes, let's check in with another fool and his fortune. The Fool's Fortune is one of the classiest card games to come along in a while, which carries through to the artwork, the game terminology, and its various levels of game complexity. A Fool's Fortune is a set collection game in the spirit of Rummy, but borrows some elements from other card games like Magic the Gathering. You're trying to complete 3 sets of 5 cards. There are 2 kinds of cards in the deck: the fortune cards and the character cards. The fortune cards displays realms by color, and the realm's name is on the bottom of the card. There are also 5 different resources on the cards, indicated by gold symbols in the corners. The fortune cards can be aligned in 2 different ways: by realm with 1 of each resource, or by resource with 1 of each realm. Then there are the character cards. The easiest play rules is Act 1, and in this one all the character cards have the same 2 abilities. Before we go any further, let's set the stage. The play area is divided into several sections. In the middle there's the Fate, the deck of cards you're drawing from, the Road, where the character cards are discarded to, or the Fair, where the fortune cards are discarded to. You have the Crew area, which are your character cards you have in play. The Cache is where you build your sets of cards, and below that is your Camp. And now the stage is set and it's time to begin to play. There are 3 phases in the game, named after the times of day. The beginning phase is of course called the morning phase, and in the morning phase you draw cards to restore your hand up to 3. You ready any previously engaged character cards by rotating them upright. And finally, before moving on to the afternoon phase, you draw 1 additional card from the Fate deck, which is called your allowance. As an optional role, you may consider having a morning cup of coffee. The afternoon, that's where the action happens. You can recruit a character into your crew from your hand, but you have to pay their fee, which is simply placing 2 aligned fortune cards under them. Next, you can use your character's abilities to fetch fortunes from the fair. Or you could cut the character from the crew, which sends their fees to the camp, making them available for use. Then you can add to or create new sets. Sets are created from any combination of cards from your hand or your camp, but they must be 3 aligned cards. Finally, before moving into the night phase, you can rearrange your cards from your hand or your camp to expand on the cards in your cache or on your crew. In the night phase, it's time to clean up and pay your dues. You pay your dues by discarding a card from your hand or from your camp, and you have to discard any fortune sets that are under 3 cards and any fortune cards in your camp. The player that has 3 closed sets of 5 and has 1 ready character and pays their final dues is the winner. That's the basic game, or Act 1, the Pages game. It may sound simple, but you really have to pay attention to what your opponents are doing in this game. In Act 2, the Barons game, adds more complexity by introducing new abilities for the character cards. Characters can now kick back. What the kickback ability does, when you engage 1 of your characters, you can send 1 of your fees to the camp, but if they're not paid back, you'll have to discard that character. Another ability is the ability to barter. When your character barters, they are engaged. And they can take a fortune from 1 of their rivals' to open sets, as long as they can repay it with another fortune that aligns with it. Your opponent may not like that, so he can engage 1 of his characters to put a stop to that. In Act 2, a couple other unique character abilities are Savvy and Skilled. The Savvy characters, when engaged, they can have kind of a super fetch or super barter ability. The Savvy version of these can't be blocked. Once your opponent also has a Savvy character, they can engage to block. And finally, there are Charmed abilities. The Charmed Fate ability allows the character to draw 1 card from the Fate deck. The other ability is a Charmed Bargain, which allows them to draw 1 card from the Fate deck, but they have to pay an extra card for the dues later on. The final abilities in Act 2 is the ability to flash a character from your hand or crew. And yes, this is perfectly fine to do even if you're playing in a public place. Think of flash as like one-time use ability. The universal abilities that all characters could do are to use the barter ability or to refuse a barter. Then finally there's the Act 3 of the game, the Masters game, where the talents of the skilled characters come into full play, which is found in the text box of the character cards. Here, to some extent, is where the game takes some resemblance to various collectible card games. The beauty of this game is not just in its looks. This game can almost literally please all kinds of players. You can play as a casual game with your grandma. You can move up to Act 2 to add a little more complexity, or you can ramp it up to Act 3 for your hardcore gamer friends. Few games have been able to target such a wide variety of gamers, and now we're done foolishly spending our fortune. Let's grab our swords and strap on our armor and crawl down into the dungeons of Thunderstone Advance.
I don't understand how Balak could have gathered those horses so quickly.
Those barracks weren't even here last week.
All this material must have been teleported in somehow. Check with wizards and see if they notice any ripples or whatever they call it.
Those damn Korvaxes finally chose a side.
Yeah, the wrong side. One of them stole my favorite hat yesterday. Probably using it for one of their sodden nests.
Report to Captain Langmount, we need 1 more regiment to put this thing down. I hate to think that traitor Balak used to be one of ours.
Thunderstone Advance is a deck building game by AEG with the fantasy dungeon crawl theme. A deck building game is a type of card game where players are acquiring or buying their cards within the game, creating their own personal deck. In Thunderstone Advance, the object is to bring a group of adventurers together to recover a Thunderstone, an ancient relic of evil power which has fallen into the wrong hands. You arm your heroes with weapons, spells, and level them up with the experience points you earn by taking out some monsters. But first you need to build the dungeon and the village. There are several pre-made scenarios you can set up, but you can also randomly generate a scenario. But for some reason we felt compelled to go with the Tower of Compulsion scenario. In the Tower of Compulsion scenario, you try to get through Balak's hordes, and get to Balak to get the Thunderstone out of his hands. To face off against these fierce opponents, you have some heroes at your command. In the nearby village, you find all the supplies and help you'll need. There's several different icons to be found on the cards. There's the cost to buy the cards, a light source icon. On the character and weapon cards, there's the strength icon. The coins on the card are the currency you use to buy other cards in the village. And then there's the experience icons. You use experience to level up your characters. And finally there's the all-important victory points. You'll find these on creatures and from leveling up to level 3 and some other items. When you get your 6 cards on your turn, you decide if you're heading into the village to level up, to buy supplies or get new recruits, or if you want to head off to the dark, damp dungeons. When you head into the village after revealing all your 6 cards, you can use their gold value to purchase another card from the village stores. When buying weapons, you should be aware if the character cards have the strength to wield them. Also be sure not to overlook spells, characters, or weapons that might produce light. In the town square, you can find other recruits to help you on your quest. And after you acquired your newfound purchases, they all go to your discard pile. And finally, if you have any experience tokens from a previous turn, you can level up. But if you head off into the dungeon, you have to be aware of the darkness penalties. The dungeon halls get progressively darker, and you want to be sure you have enough light to avoid having your attack strength reduced. Item and spell cards when going into dungeon take their effect, but the weapon cards have to be equipped on a character card that has enough strength to do so. If your total attack strength meets or beats a creature in the dungeon, you defeat it, and it goes into your discard pile, and you gain the experience shown on the card. And any victory points on the card to be tallied at the end of the game. But before you attack, you should be aware of several effects on the cards. Aftermath is something that takes effect regardless of which side that won the combat. Battle is an effect that takes place after choosing a monster, but before the fight is resolved. Global is an effect that affects all players, and Ready happens when it's first revealed. One strategy to consider in the dungeon is having cards in your deck that can give you other cards while you are in the dungeon. The Mass Teleport card, the Moonstone card, or the combo of a regular and a long spear, for example, can give you extra cards. So with little luck of the draw, may turn the tides and put you ahead earlier in the game. Before the game begins, someone should read all the different abilities on the different levels of the characters. Some other cards in the games are the curse cards and the familiar cards. Once you go through all the minions in the dungeons, you'll eventually find the big bad guy. And once he's defeated, you recover the Thunderstone and the game is over. You determine who won, everybody counts up their victory points on their cards. The one with the most is, of course, the winner. There are a few optional rules to make considered in the back of the manual. The dungeon setup, for example, might be a good one to use the first time you play. It arranges the monster deck so basically the lower level monsters come out first. Thunderstone Advance is a deck building game that will appeal to fans of the fantasy genre and collectible card games and other deck building games. Now that we're done wandering around in dark dungeons, let's wander into a couple garage sales and thrift stores to find out some new uses for games you may not have use for in the first place. If you come across some old games in a thrift store and garage sale, be sure to take a closer look at them. They may have some good uses for them you didn't even realize. For example, Liar's Dice. In this particular version of Liar's Dice, you of course get a bunch of dice. It also came with a bag that's perfect for use for other games like Scrabble or Carcassonne for drawing random tiles out of. It also came with 6 dice cup, which is really handy if you tend to have issues with runaway dice. And here's another dice game, Risk and Roll 2000. You of course get a bunch of dice in here, but more importantly you get this nice dice rolling tray. If you have an old Monopoly game with some missing pieces, don't throw it out. That money tray might come in handy for other games. And maybe some of your games are missing some pawns. Sorry is probably the best game to stock up on extra pawn pieces, because it has 4 pawns in 4 different colors. And finally, Dicecapade is not only just a great game to pick up, but it's a great way to kick off your dice collection. You've been watching the Gamers Grind Show. Be sure to like us on Facebook, visit our website, and of course come on down and play some games off the wall.